On a sizable, desolate island in the middle of nowhere, the film opens. The vast ocean encircles the remote area on all sides, with no way to cross it. Zoa, a young woman, wakes up stranded on the island's shores with no recollection of the previous 12 hours. She wanders the island in frustration, looking for any indication of human life. A short while later, Zoe discovers an empty bottle on the beach. She has a flashback to the circumstances that led to her isolation as soon as she picks it up. The scene abruptly changes to the start of everything 1 week ago. After a long day at work, Zoe travels back to the city and greets her younger sister, Gaby, at the door. She settles into bed a short while later and is startled to discover a strange message from an unidentified number. Despite her initial misgivings about the text, Zoe chooses to reply to the unknown number against her better judgment. When questioned, the mysterious texter admits that they are Eden, a brand new beverage company, and tells Zoe that she has been chosen to attend the launch party. The unknown texter explains that the occasion involves a free trip to a far-off island and sounds like a lot of fun. Zoe is intrigued by the offer and accepts it right away, grinning at the thought of going to a free island party. However, the correspondent lays out a set of requirements that she must adhere to before accepting the offer. First, don't disclose the location of the event to a second party, and second, don't bring anyone along. Despite finding the guidelines to be quite hazy, Zoe agrees to them out of concern for losing her invitation. She prepares her belongings the following weekend and travels to the pickup location. Zoe and Judith travel to the hidden location together, despite agreeing to abide by the company's rules. When they arrive, they run into another invitee named Aldo, and the two of them are then guided by an automated drone to an abandoned building. The group is eventually separated from the miniature aircraft and is then confronted by a closed door. A masked man appears a short while later and lets the group enter the structure where they meet and mingle with other invited guests. They don't have to wait long, though, as a convoy of party buses shows up to transport them to the island. The guests quickly rush into the car and spend the rest of the night dancing as they travel. The masked organizers lead them to a boat after they have finally traveled for several hours to a seaport. The invitees must first go through a verification checkpoint, though, in order to board the cruise. When Judith sees this, she recoils because she doesn't have an invitation, but still makes her way to the checkpoint. Thankfully, her risk pays off, as she is permitted to enter the organization despite not having an invitation. All of the visitors are thoroughly searched, and as a precaution, they are even required to pass through a metal detector. They are also instructed to put their phones in the boat as a requirement for entry. The partygoers are immediately very suspicious of this, but they eventually give in to the organizers' demands and hand over their cell phones. They all climbed aboard the boat and set out for the island after all the preparations had been made. They finally reach their destination about an hour later, and the ushers give them all wristbands. After they've settled in, they start to party and stay up late drinking and having fun. During the occasion, Zoe meets a man named Daniel, and they click right away. Astrid, the chief organizer, makes a significant announcement in the midst of the festivities. She says that the launch party was attended by 100 people. However, only 5 of the 100 attendees are chosen at random by the beverage company to try their brand new energy drink. Africa, Ivan, Charlie, Aldo, and Zoe are among the chosen candidates. Each of the 5 guests is given a mystery drink, which they quickly down before continuing to party. While doing so, Judith looks through the crowd for Zoe before making her way to a tent by the island's shores. She observes 2 of the organizers assaulting and putting a man to death in a water barrel there. This instantly frightens her, and she dashes off to continue looking for Zoe. Zoe is at the opposite end of the island, wandering around in circles while experiencing terrible side effects from the mystery drink. She eventually climbs to the top of a steep cliff and is just about to plunge to her death when a strange man appears and saves her. Zoe keeps having visions before passing out and sleeping for the rest of the night on the cliff. We then go back to the beginning of the film. Zoe awakens by herself and begins to explore the island in search of any residents. Fortunately, she locates the other 4 carefully chosen visitors who tried the mysterious beverage, and the 2 of them search the island for hints. They spend hours looking, only to find that the other visitors had left on the boat, leaving them all by themselves. A drone appears as they try to decide what to do next and guides them to a mansion on the other side of the island. They are stunned to find a village of islanders there, led by Astrid, the chief organizer. She welcomes the stranded group to civilization and explains that the company's boat sadly left them behind. She offers them a place to stay while they wait and assures them that the vessel will return. Even though Zoe is relieved to hear this, she continues to worry about Judith. Each of the 5 visitors is assigned to a different apartment in the meantime, where they coexist in the same area as the other residents. Zoe quickly finds the apartment she was assigned and meets her new roommates Claudia and Nico, who turns out to be the strange man who saved her the previous evening. A quiet Claudia just observes them from a distance as Zoe thanks him for helping her, and the 2 hit it off right away. The group asks about the arrival of the boat the following day. They are informed, much to their dismay, that the tides are too strong for the boat to be able to land ashore. Though disappointed, the majority of them hold this belief and take pleasure in their time on the island. But an untrusting Aldo grows weary of the organizers and suspicious of the activities on the island. In the scene that follows, Zoe discovers an island resident by the name of Orson and thinks he looks uncannily familiar. It occurs to Zoe after some thought that he was with Judith the night of her arrival. She closely pursues him out of concern and asks where Judith is. However, Orson claims he never met Judith and exhibits aggressive behavior, which causes Zoe to worry even more about her friend's safety. Later, as Zoe runs toward the main mansion, Orson turns and leaves. She is shocked to discover that everyone on the island is participating in a therapy exercise. Astrid recognizes her when she arrives and invites her to participate in the exercise. In spite of Zoe's skepticism, she eventually agrees to the program after some persuasion. In response to a series of inquiries from the head organizer about her upbringing, family, and prior trauma, Zoe opens up about some of her darkest secrets. It turns out that Zoe had a difficult upbringing because her mother was a heroin addict and her father was frequently absent. She was therefore given the sole responsibility for looking after her younger sister, Gabby. Astrid gives Zoe a hug and comforts her with a string of encouraging words. After the session, which makes Zoe feel relieved, the group is informed the following morning that the boat will arrive the following day to transport them home. The guests are happy to hear the news, but Aldo decides to leave the island on his terms because he still has his doubts about the locals. The rest of the group, meanwhile, mixes and blends in without incident with the locals. Ivan and a resident form a bond after the pair play a somber piano piece, and Zoe quickly warms up to Nico. Astrid and her husband Eric host a farewell party that evening in honor of their visitor's upcoming departure. Aldo makes his way through the terrain and comes across a cargo boat unloading a shipment at the shores while the other islanders party all night. Aldo sees this as his opportunity to flee and rushes back to the group to let them know. He only succeeds in locating Charlie and informing him of his scheme. Aldo is forced to flee alone after Charlie dismisses him due to his intoxication. He swims to the boat and quickly makes his way back to the island's shores. He hides himself among the cargo once on board and, after exhaling a sigh of relief, drifts off to sleep. Aldo is awakened several hours later by the sound of the boat's engine failing. He hastily climbs to the upper deck where, to his surprise, he sees one of the islanders glaring at him. She tells Aldo to get down on his knees, and he does so while frightenedly gazing at her. She pulls out a device and uses it to pierce Aldo's skull without any hesitation. Kills him immediately as she returns to the island carrying his corpse. Then it becomes clear that Astrid is the cult leader and that the island's residents are all followers. She gives the locals instructions on how to charm the visitors into staying on the island forever. The following morning, Zoe gets ready for the arrival of the boat. She sets out in search of her fellow visitors, eager to get home. She quickly alerts the others after learning that Aldo has vanished. After learning the news, Charlie thinks back to his encounter with Aldo the night before and shares his escape strategy with Zoe. Zoe is deeply troubled by the revelation and grows weary of the people on the island as she gets closer to leaving. Astrid was already working on strategies to entice the visitors to stay. Africa and Iban choose to stay on the island under the sway of the locals, and they both sign documents tying them to the cult. Gabby worries about her sister's disappearance back in the city and asks their alcoholic mother for assistance. Fortunately, the group contacts a cop who reports Zoe missing and contacts the appropriate authorities. However, since the police don't go out of their way to find her, this doesn't really accomplish much. Frustrated, Gabby makes an attempt to persuade her mother to act more forcefully, but is met with silence. When Gabby finally snaps, she searches Zoe's room for information about her whereabouts. Daniel tells Gabby about his encounter with Zoe, as well as the invitation and trip to the remote island. This piques Gabby's interest, and she decides to meet Daniel in the hope of meeting her sister. The islanders gather once more for their regular therapy session in the scene that follows. Charlie is chosen specifically to tell his story this time. He is initially hesitant to participate in the session, similar to Zoe, but Astrid eventually persuades him to speak up. Charlie spends a lot of time discussing how his sister's death caused him to become estranged from his family, particularly his mother. It turns out that he was careless, and when they were kids, she drowned and died. Because of this, his mother no longer speaks to him often and has hated him ever since. When Charlie hears this, Astrid comforts him. Before she can continue the session, Zoe recognizes her for what she is, and she explodes in a rage. She accuses the locals of lying about the boat's arrival and calls Astrid out for tricking them into staying. Ultimately, Nico yanks a furious Zoe from the group and asks her to meet him later that night if she wants to learn the truth about the island. Though confused by his justification, Zoe accepts to meet with him later that day. Nico takes her to an underground cave at dusk and shows her a corpse that is lying on a wooden framework. Zoe is horrified to learn upon closer inspection that the dead body on the pile is actually Judith's. As tears roll down her cheeks, Zoe lets out a scream that signals the end of the episode.